This video is a part of our Subaru Build series. On our last video, we had a few comments asking us for more specifics with our measurements for the pieces of the platform. So we thought it would be fun to dive in a little bit deeper into our measurements, show you what the platform pieces look like outside of the car, how we put them back in, and things like that.
So like Sarah mentioned, we're going to talk about some of these pieces. And this piece is part one, or piece one. Okay, and this is the biggest part. It's the highest weight bearing piece. So it's got a lot of different supports built in there. So if you notice here, it's wider than it is longer. And the reason we did that, and we'll talk about that when we put it into the car, or into the Subaru, excuse me, is it comes up to the back of the seat line. So we'll talk about that. But here we have three pieces, and it also doubles as storage. Someone mentioned that they would like it to be shorter. You could. We just did it long enough for us so that I could fit in, me being the tallest person. But if you notice here, I want to get my measurements here right. Notice that the length, so from top to bottom here as it's sitting, is 30.5 inches. So 30.5 inches, and we'll show why that piece is in there once it goes into the car. And then width is 42.75 inches. And we'll talk about that too, because we had to find the widest amount of space possible, but also have it still be able to fit into the narrowest part of the Subaru. So this is part one. And like I said, there's three different supports, or fins as we could call them, and they're 9 inches. So if you wanted to have more room up top, once you're in the car and you're sleeping, you could also make that shorter. And eventually when we get to the point where we do another video, a follow-up video where we have everything inside of there, some of our bins, we wanted to have bins that would support, or excuse me, fit in there correctly. So we went for optimum storage is the reason why. But yeah, this is part one.
So here is the other side of this part one. I'm actually going to lay it down so you can see the three fins that we have going up. You could see when I showed you that other side that we have drilled in screws down the length of each fin. We also used clamps and wood glue just for some extra security here. When this piece is inside of the Subaru, and we'll show you once it's in there, we do have these extra pieces of support that we can wedge in here just if we want some extra stability, because this will be holding a lot of weight once we are in the Subaru.
So this next part is these two pieces. We have 2 and 3 together. You'll notice up top here, Sarah, you could check out this. This is part 3. We'll talk about that in a second. Well, for part 2, let's get into that. We have 3 supports for this. And if you look, we have one that runs side to side in the car, and this bottom one as well, this fin, and then this one runs with the car. So for this first part, I just want you guys to see that the length is 27.5. So you notice the length, or the height in this case, it's standing up, is 27.5 inches. And the width is 41.5 inches. But there's something I want to point out too. The way that we took into account the seat folding down, or the seats folding down, it had a slight slope. So what we did was, at the back of the car, we had a longer height, or a longer width, which is, you can see this inch right here we added on, which is the same length as those fins in the car, 9 inches. And then we shortened it up here and kind of sanded it in so it wouldn't snag on the carpet of the car, was 8 inches. So this fin is 8 inches. This one is 9 to match that width where it meets part 2 in the back. And then here, this one is also 8 inches to fit with this. Like I said, we sanded this one down too. Put in the same exact way with the clamps, the screws, lining things up for the car too. Now, if you jump to the top here, we have part 3, which is this piece that folds out right here. So in the car, this would be where our heads are at. And the length, or the height on this one, is 11.5 inches, but this is the most probably customizable piece you could do. You can make it shorter if you're a shorter person. You can make it longer if you're a taller person. We built this, like I said, to fit the tallest person, which would be me, at about 5'10" to 6 feet tall. So this is 11.5 inches tall as the length, and as the width is 41.5 to match the same width as this bottom piece, and as well as part 1 actually as well. So something else that we did to make sure that we could support our heads, we saw other videos where there are people with poles or little pockets or cups that would then go down to like the seat well, where they could prop up people's heads or prop up weight. But we wanted to have more space for dog things, shoes, bags, whatever, sleeping bags. So we decided that we were going to use these two pieces, which, side note, we used a bungee during our trip. Super helpful for this build to make sure when you're driving or on a bumpy road, these things don't rattle. Also something to keep in mind. But for these supports, which are screwed right into part 2, we made these probably about 6 inches to 7 inches tall. It's kind of pretty much whatever you want, and we use door hinges for that too. So Sarah, you could zoom in close here. We have our door hinges that we used that would sit on this piece 2, excuse me, and that this would fold out to support our heads. And it actually worked extremely well. Both of these fold out as well on the inside, and it lays flat. So it's pretty much almost flat on part 2 and part 3. Now on the back side here, Sarah, if you could come on the other side, we looked into ways that we could also have this hinge. So the way that we wanted this to hinge is we use one of these long hinges. Like I mentioned, like the door hinges, they're shorter, sturdier, stronger ones for structure support. This one's really just to kind of keep this piece with the other piece and make sure that it can fold easier. And we, like I said, we just made sure we measured on the width, made sure it was the same on both sides, slapped it on there, screwed it in, works pretty well. So that's parts 2 and part 3 all in one. And then what we'll do next is we'll kind of lay this down so you can see the underside as well, and we'll go from there.
All right, so here is the other side of parts 2 and 3, or piece 2 and 3. We wanted to show you just at a different angle, just the difference to account for the slope in the car that Zach already mentioned, but here's just a little bit better of a view at it, that these are flush together, and then this was about an inch more. Here is it laid out with these pieces flipped up. We can put those back down as well. We wanted to have these 2 cubbies on the side just to be able to access our storage, because this part 2 will be in the middle section of the car. So when you open the door here, you'll have access to either this cubby on this side or that cubby on the other side of the car, which we thought was really convenient, especially this summer when we were living out of this Subaru.
All right, so next we'll just kind of show you how they go into the car, pretty seamless. This is part 1, goes to the back of the car. We'll show you how that goes in. Then I'll have Sarah come and zoom in why we took those measurements and things like that. But for this first piece, pretty much just goes in like that. And notice how, for us, a way and a land marker that we knew when it was in far enough was we kind of lined it up here. So if you have, I think this is where the spare tires and other things like that and other storage stuff, that's kind of a marker for us. And then if Sarah, if you could zoom in over here too, like we mentioned earlier, there's almost no wiggle room over here with this fin, or the support rather, to the sidewall. So it's really, really snug. We wanted optimum surface area, so that's why we chose those measurements from earlier. But that's pretty much how part 1 fits in the back of the car.
Woo!
All right, so next we're going to show you how we put in part 2 and 3. A little bit more tedious, just because it's coming in from the side, so be patient with me. But this is how part 2 and 3 fits. Where those supports, those head supports are, those are going to face the front of the car, so I'm going to put it in that way for us. Just like that. And that way, notice how notice how the car seats are forward right now. You can bring those back for a little bit more support too. But that's pretty much how it fits right now.
So here's what everything looks like in the car. Part 1, part 2, and then part 3, you can see back there is folded out. This platform for us with the storage, these long cubbies down on these sides, the side cubbies, like I mentioned before, on either side of the car, worked really well for us when we lived for a couple weeks over the summer. We drove out west, and we had a great amount of storage, a great amount of space to sleep for car camping, and it worked out really well for us. So yeah, so here's what it looks like all laid out.
So that was parts 1, 2, and 3, the lengths, the measurements. We just also want to tell you really quickly some of the rationale. The reason we chose the plywood we chose, it was smooth, so taking things in and out, nothing got shredded or ripped apart, because there's a lot of moving in and getting in and out, of course, when you're using a build like this. Some other things you would have needed, we used a handsaw for some of the finer cuts, we used a chop saw, sandpaper to kind of make sure that some of those supports underneath were sanded down so that it's not ripping the carpet in the Subaru. And of course we use like wood glue, we use deck screws, things like that. But that's pretty much the other materials that obviously we didn't talk about yet, and some of the rationale why we chose the plywood we chose.
In our next video, we're going to show you how we fully furnished it when we took our road trip this summer and did a lot of car camping. We also had a dog with us, so that played a factor into our storage, the things and the gear that we put inside of it and all of that. So be looking out for that video next.
And thank you for the comments and all those other things. Keep reaching out. Our measurements are totally out in the open. If you guys need anything else, let us know, and we appreciate you.